You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in.
a Mamamia podcast.
Hello and welcome to Cancelled. I am Claire Stevens, and on this podcast we talk about a celebrity or a TV show that has been discussed in the context of cancellation. Are they cancelled? Probably not, no. But is it important to go through their transgressions and work out whether they're legit or just people on Twitter being angry? Yes, definitely. Now, Jessie, who are you?
I'm Jessie Stevens. I'm here to go through this court process with you, to have meaningful discussions about celebrity crimes, because some are worse than others, and this podcast is about justice and us finding it. Who is on trial today?
Amy Schumer.
Some of you may have heard I got married this year. Sorry, ladies. It's been locked down. And some people are like, what are you going to talk about now in your stand-up? All you talked about was getting railed. And I'm like, thank you. But it's true. I mean, I'm a little sad. I'm never going to get a you up text again. You know? Not like they were rolling in, but it was nice to know someone was thinking about me. I one time got a you up text, and I wrote the guy back, and then he texted me, sorry, wrong text. I was like, me too, I'll just cancel my Uber, who cares?
So Amy Schumer is a 40-year-old comedian, actor and writer, best known for her stand-up comedy, her sketch comedy series Inside Amy Schumer, and her films Trainwreck and I Feel Pretty, which she produced and wrote and starred in. But in recent years, the internet has turned on Amy Schumer. Every time you go to a Reddit thread about celebrities people hate, she is top of the list. People on Twitter are snarky about her 24/7. She's basically the cool person to hate. And here's a broad summary of why people hate her, which we'll obviously get into. Firstly, she steals jokes. Allegedly. Secondly, she's not funny. People say she's not funny. Thirdly, they say her whole gag is, I have sex and drink a lot. That is her gag. Yeah. I don't see a problem with that. Also, people say she looks like a chipmunk. So that's something that upsets them. Here are a few tweets that I want to just read out to enter the vibe into the courtroom, because we do need a vibe. Every courtroom you walk in, what's the vibe?
And every court case, I mean, there's been some pretty high-profile court cases going on in Sydney. They begin with some tweets. It's all right, let's just see what, Greg thinks. So as long as we've got that on the table, what are the Amy Schumer tweets that we need to be across?
These are just some of the top ones that I found when I did a quick search. The real crime at the Oscars is that Amy Schumer didn't get slapped at all. Amy Schumer gets a lot of hate, but I still don't think she gets enough. Amy Schumer is a genuinely terrible individual, and I want to know who the hell is out there liking her enough for her to have a career.
Me. But yeah, keep going.
And I'm convinced that Amy Schumer is an industry plant created specifically for the purpose of upholding the idea that women aren't funny so that criminals like Louis C.K. can still win all the awards.
That is an elaborate conspiracy theory. And you know what those tweets reminded me of? The male equivalent of Amy Schumer, James Corden.
Oh.
I reckon she is as despised as James Corden. And the problem is, I quite liked James Corden. I think he's got a beautiful voice. I watched Carpool Karaoke with Adele, with Justin Bieber, and I went, this man is a genius. What a great concept. Then I read the commentary and I went, I guess I hate him. I guess there is James Corden oversaturation. And then my perspective got changed, and that's what I think might be happening with Amy Schumer.
I think so too. I think that's a great parallel, that she is the James Corden. Jessie, I want to start with something really weird, something a bit rogue. It's 2015. We've just started at Mamamia, and the head of podcasts here is Monique Bowley. She's very funny. She's a very talented journalist. She gets the opportunity to interview Amy Schumer for her new movie Trainwreck, except it goes horribly, horribly wrong.
It seems to be kind of a big deal, like you're the new female comedian. How does it feel to be really creating such a commotion about being a female comedian?
It's overwhelming. I just think of myself as a comedian, but it's great that people know that I'm a woman when they look at me.
Congratulations on the film. Great work.
We should preface that Amy Schumer was Monique Bowley's hero.
Yes.
She loved her. And what happened during that interview is she panicked. And things went so wrong. And I think you and I can identify with being in a situation where someone is looking at you with such loathing that you start to behave very strangely.
I've done it on red carpets many times with celebrities, and I can see in their eyes that they're looking at me going, why? What's wrong with you? And the more they look at me like that, the weirder I become.
Yes, I recall us meeting a celebrity on the red carpet, won't say who. It was a D to E grade Australian star. And you got nervous, you had a mic, and you put it to their mouth, and you just forgot your question.
It was really embarrassing.
Nothing came out.
And he called me out.
And he was like, you forgot what you were going to say. You lost all cred. And that was the moment that ended your career in a lot of ways. And so that reminded me a lot of what happened with Monique Bowley in this interview.
And I do want to say that when a bit of BTS, a bit of just goss, when you're a journalist and you do get to interview somebody that you idolize, everybody has a script in their head of what's going to happen. I interviewed Zac Efron a few years ago, and I cannot explain the certainty with which I knew that I would walk in, I'd interview him. He'd be polite in the interview just like I was any other journalist. But then
professional.
Yeah, professional. But then he would call me afterwards and say, we connected, you're the one that I've always loved. And then we would be happily ever after. And Monique had that about Amy Schumer. She just knew that they were meant to be best friends. It didn't happen.
I love that sweater.
I wore it for you.
Thank you.
Do you want a cop a feel?
I can imagine what it feels like.
I think that was where the interview began to go wrong.
Okay, well, Amy's clearly annoyed that
Monique exists.
That Monique exists, but also that it's this whole thing about, like, you're a comedian and you're a woman. Because I guess she's like, I know that. But Mons then starts to ask some really standard questions that you ask celebrities at these press junkets. And the entire idea is that they just have standard anecdotes and prepared answers and you say like one thing and then they go on forever and then your 8 minutes or whatever is up. But Amy isn't having it. She doesn't have any stock anecdotes. There are just awkward silences and even more awkward facial expressions. Amy is looking at the camera like, help me. Mons asks if Amy has a message for the Australian sisterhood.
I don't know, you guys get married pretty young. I would say maybe give it a year longer. Just make sure you're in the right thing. And then it's about what you want instead of what you feel like you're supposed to do.
Which is weird because it's not true. And I think about it a lot.
I was looking at Amy going, I get it. You're tired. You don't want to be at work. You've probably done 1,000 of these. You've got this woman walk in who's really excited to meet you. You can't match her energy. And I don't think it's the camera person she's looking at, Claire. I think she's looking at her PR person and she's saying, get this woman out of this room. Cut it. I'm done.
Mons asks if she wants to play a game. And Amy's
The answer is no. The answer is just
no.
a straight up no.
She's like, am I allowed to just say no? And Mons calls it a word association game, but then she starts and Amy's like, I feel like you don't know what a word association game is. And it's just embarrassing because it's a picture association game. Anyway, so Mons has all these pictures and she knew in her head what she wanted it to look like, which was like banter. You know, just a bit of back and forth. You're seeing Tony Abbott in his budgie smugglers and you go, ew, yuck. But no, Amy's word was, And then when Mons tried to say a word, Amy was like, no, that's it. That's all.
And Mons said this herself at the time. We can all see this through Amy Schumer's perspective. It wasn't a great game. Monique is one of the most creative, intelligent, brilliant people I've ever met. That game wasn't great. And the reason it wasn't great was because she overthought it. She just overthought it.
So the interview ends, and when it did end, Mons went to the bathroom and cried and called her boss to ask if she was going to get fired. We just needed to enter it into the courtroom. Do I think it's evidence of Amy Schumer not being a nice person? No. She was having a bad day. And she snapped at, not snapped, she called out another journalist that same day, an Australian journalist, who called her character a slut. And she was like, no, not having that. She wasn't vibing that day. And therefore, Monique had a horrible, horrible interview. But I just thought that was important context. All right, moving on to something a little bit more serious than an awkward interview. Accusations that Amy Schumer is a racist. She's made jokes throughout her career that in hindsight do look very distasteful. Here are some examples that often get brought up. There's a joke where she says nothing works 100% of the time except Mexicans. That's kind of fucked.
Yep.
I used to date Latino guys, now I prefer consensual.
That's more fucked.
That's actually more fucked. Gone Girl is the story of what one crazed white woman or all Latinas do if you cheat on them. And when she told that one, it was at an award show and they panned to Jennifer Lopez, and Jennifer Lopez's face is just like, no.
On Cancelled, we don't love a racist joke.
No.
They're not helpful. They're not particularly creative. What I will say in Amy Schumer's defense, because I guess that's my job, is that she's had a career that spanned for more than 20 years. She's going to have said some stuff. There are going to be bad jokes and good jokes and distasteful jokes and clever jokes and all of that. Do we cancel a comedian for a bad joke? I don't know.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
So these do date back to 2015 and earlier, and Schumer has since said that she doesn't write material about race anymore. But she says that she used to do a lot of short, dumb jokes like this because she was playing a dumb white girl on stage. That was her persona.
Yeah.
But she says that in the years since, as she's realised she has more of an influence, she stopped telling jokes about race on stage, and I've evolved as an artist.
And I will say that while I accept that there's a bunch of jokes she's told that aren't great, she is the butt of the majority of her own jokes. So her body, her appearance, her sex life, her pregnancy, and that's more than you can say for most male comics.
Yes,
In
agreed.
terms of punching down, she does not do it as much as male comics do.
Exactly. And interestingly, one of the biggest articles about Schumer's alleged racism, which was titled "Don't Believe Her Defenders, Amy Schumer's Jokes Are Racist," and it was published in the Washington Post, one of the writers of that, Stacey Patton, was interviewed after it, and she admitted that she had never watched Amy's show or her stand-up and formed her judgment of Schumer based on what she saw on Twitter. Now, Jessie, do you think you should base your judgment of someone based on what you see on Twitter?
I don't think you should base anything ever on Twitter. I think it's a bad, bad place that maligns most of what people say. May I just present into the courtroom one other example of racism, however? Did you ever see a film called Snatched?
We're going out tonight.
I'm definitely not.
You're gonna miss this whole trip. Everything shouldn't be so scary.
Hi, I'm James.
In the club with my bad bitches. Got a gun to my tongue, about to blast with it.
That was not what it looked like.
It looked like you were washing your vagina in the sink.
It had Amy Schumer and Goldie Hawn. And not only was it one of the worst films ever created, it was a little bit racist. And I wrote a piece for Mamamia called I Saw Snatched and I Walked Out After 28 Minutes. And it was so bad. I think she went to Ecuador. She kept accidentally killing people with spades in Ecuador. And when she ran out of jokes, which was about 20 minutes in, she just got her tit out. And I was like, I don't mind Amy Schumer, but this isn't her best work. And Goldie Hawn was looking around going, did I agree to this? How did I end up here? Goldie Hawn was playing her mother, and I left, and my tickets were free, and I think I paid too much. So I wanted to tender that into the courtroom as another example of a bit distasteful from Amy.
That wasn't that long ago, that movie.
No.
Wasn't long enough ago. Because I was going to say that in an article for Vox about all of this, a writer, Alex Abad Santos, says that basically the problem with a lot of what people say about Amy Schumer and race is that it assumes she's not capable of changing or evolving as an artist. But basically being a comedian, you have to change and evolve in front of people. Like you can't have comedians and you can't have comedy if people aren't allowed to evolve. It's such a public thing that, you know, if you're a writer, you can do plenty of bad writing on your own, but you can't do plenty of stand-up comedy on your own. You're going to have to make the mistakes publicly. I think that's really interesting because I think it's just that we have a record of all the screwed up things she's ever thought.
Yes, and the rest of us have the right to have a bad day at work and not get cancelled for it. But comedians, and we saw this recently with Chris Rock, no matter where you stand, it's like you have a bad day at work and the repercussions are a lot bigger.
Race is a huge blind spot for a lot of white performers. But I think that what this points to in terms of Amy Schumer being called out for it is that the industry is changing and our idea of what's acceptable is changing. And that's why people are pushing quotas and diversity and representation. Because if Amy Schumer pitched, or if somebody looked at that script who was Ecuadorian, they would have said, that's not funny.
That's not funny for us to just be attacked with spades for what I can assume was 90 minutes.
Actually, anybody else in the room would say, hi, I'm not Ecuadorian, but it's also not funny for me. It's just not.
Very true, very true.
Moving on to stealing jokes, because this is one of the most damning accusations against Amy Schumer, and when her name gets brought up, it is just synonymous with it. There are a lot of compilation videos of a female comedian saying something and then Amy Schumer saying the same joke, but here are the allegations. So in 2016, 3 female comedians came out on Twitter accusing Schumer of joke theft. There was one woman, Tammy Pescatelli, who said that basically the irony is that Amy Schumer claims to be a feminist and yet only steals from other female comedians, and she's in a trap because she can't call it out, or she's jealous or career shamed. These are the jokes that Amy Schumer was accused of stealing. And Jessie, I want to know, is it stolen or not?
I'll be the decider, yes.
So the first joke is around being rich enough to pay for someone to slap food out of your hands. A comedian called Kathleen Madigan originally joked that Oprah is so rich she could hire someone to slap the food out of her hands.
Mm-hmm.
Then Amy Schumer joked, she did a skit about a new weight loss program where a chef would slap the food out of your hands and trainers would work you out while you sleep.
Slap Chef.
With Slap Chef.
With Slap Chef.
Slap Chef. What's that?
It's a new weight loss program that takes decision-making out of the equation.
How does it work?
First, one of Slap Chef's world-class chefs makes you one of their signature dishes. Then, before you can say Slap Chef, they knock it out of your stupid mouth. Slap Chef.
But what's Sleep Gym?
Sleep Gym is a workout program where we do all the work.
Huh? Are you from Sleep Gym?
After we induce you into a coma, it's off to the gym as the Sleep Gym trainers take your body through strenuous workouts.
I think that's different because of the last bit.
Yeah, I do too. And I also think that there are some jokes that are begging to be made and that there are only so many jokes to make.
Yeah, finite amount of jokes.
There are a finite amount of jokes. I mean, you and I have been recapping Married at First Sight for the last 12 years. And what we do is sometimes we watch it separately and we look at each other's notes. They're identical jokes. There are only so many jokes to make about Al, who has the personality of a 3-month-old baby. And we found that other recappers thought the same thing. We aren't stealing.
It's called parallel thinking.
Parallel thinking, exactly.
The next one is paying for sex. So Wendy Liebman originally said, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I like it when
Did you say Wendy?
Yeah.
So, listeners, Claire doesn't know how to say the word Wendy. Try again.
Wendy.
You say Windy.
Wendy Liebman said, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I like it when the guy pays, beat, for sex.
Okay.
Then Amy Schumer said, I'm very old school. I think the guy should always pay on the first date, beat, for sex. Do you think that's the same joke?
It's a sort of obvious joke, right? I think that's quite funny, and it's also very in line with Amy Schumer's brand, which is that she's always played into the ditzy blonde thing, which is and has always been quite transgressive, I think.
I know. And so finally, there's a bit that she does, and you'll remember this, that she's been accused of stealing from a guy that she opened for a long time. So he talked about there being a sex move called the poltergeist, and you need your friend for this one. You're effing her from behind, and then you sneak out and he takes your place, and then you walk outside and wave at her through the window.
It's sexual assault, but we're laughing. But
Well,
but
Schumer said, the worst one I've ever heard is the Houdini. It's where the guy's having sex with the girl from behind. Then unbeknownst to her, his friend subs in for him. Guy one runs outside, knocks on the window, waves to the girl, which is just rape. That's just rape. It's not fair to Houdini. That's her joke. I think it is original because she's adding the bit about it being rape.
Me too. I think it absolutely is. And I think we've also got to make space for those situations in life where you think you have an original idea and you've actually just straight up stolen from someone. I mean, it happens all the time. Claire, do you remember when we were kids and I kept a quote book?
Yeah.
I kept a quote book where I was like, I think I'm going to be a famous person that writes quotes. I thought that was a job that you could just write quotes, not books or anything. So it's like, Claire, I've got all these quotes, and it was literally like, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. And you're like, that's just Gandhi. And I was like, and that was the whole quote book, because you remember them, but you don't remember where they come from. But you're like, that's really smart, but it's not your idea.
I know, and that does get tricky. So weirdly, Pescatelli went down a Twitter outrage spiral in relation to the joke stealing accusations, which I think we can all relate to. Don't you reckon on Twitter somebody calls someone out and maybe it's valid, but then over the next 24 to 48 hours, they spiral into a demon?
Yes.
So she starts comparing Schumer's behaviour to Bill Cosby, allegedly raping several women, and then she tweets, at least Cosby knocked his victims out before he raped them.
Okay.
Talking about
that's Twitter in a
stealing.
nutshell.
Yes.
That is Twitter in a nutshell. A white woman who accidentally had the same joke as you is worse than a rapist because at least she didn't drug you when she stole your jokes. What?
What the hell? In an interview later that month, Pescatelli then retracted her accusations against Schumer, saying it was probably parallel thinking. Wendy Liebman also posted on Twitter that she thought the similarities of Schumer's joke to hers were parallel thinking. And Schumer has emphatically denied any joke stealing. And she actually very recently did a lie detector test with Vanity Fair.
Coming up with new material is difficult. Have you ever stolen a joke?
No.
Yes, she's telling the truth.
She was telling the truth. So
She should go on Dr. Phil. That
She
is such
should.
a Dr. Phil move.
But I will say, men have been stealing jokes forever. English comedy actor Stan Laurel once said, all comedians steal from all comedians. He was basically saying that is just comedy. Robin Williams stole a lot of material and admitted to it because he did so much improv. He basically said, yeah, I steal it and I can't not because it comes into my head and I'm doing improv. I don't have time to filter it. Ricky Gervais has talked about stealing jokes. Jack Whitehall has been accused. Will Ferrell, Dane Cook. And a lot of comedians say they don't intentionally steal jokes. It's just that you're in the comedy scene and you're hearing people stand up and you inadvertently write them. To me, like, there are really maybe 4 instances of Amy Schumer stealing jokes, and that's in her entire career, from all her stand-up routines, episodes of her TV show, her films. It doesn't seem like that much.
Nah, I'm letting her off that charge.
I mean, you'd be pretty annoyed if you were one of the people who's... there are a lot of people on TikTok who say they got their jokes stolen, but I don't know. I don't think it's a crime in the same way that a lot of men, and especially men in comedy, have committed crimes. Jess, I want to move on to my favourite, which is willful misinterpretation. Basically, something I find hilarious about people hating comedians is when they start to willfully misinterpret their jokes in order to make them malicious.
Yes. Well, that's just Twitter. Yeah.
Yes, and if you take a joke out of context, it's going to sound mean. So a recent example was at the Oscars when Amy Schumer approached Kirsten Dunst and her partner, Jesse Plemons. Basically, Schumer was saying it takes nearly 3,000 people to put on the Oscars and every job is important, even being a seat filler. A seat filler is basically a volunteer who sits there so that when the camera pans around, it looks full. So she then gestures towards Kirsten Dunst, who's sitting right in front of her, and goes, here's a seat filler. Do you want to go to the bathroom?
That's funny because Kirsten Dunst is really fucking famous.
And really recognisable.
Yes, she's been in literally every film.
Amy Schumer takes her by the wrist, leads her out of her seat, and then sits down opposite Jesse Plemons, who is also very recognizable, and says, I'm a huge fan. And then he says, that was my wife. And she says, that's seat filler. That's weird. And it's feigning confusion and feigning ignorance. But a group of people on the internet decided that A, Amy Schumer, who is a professional comedian, was not joking, and B, Kirsten Dunst was genuinely offended.
So either she's stolen the joke, or if there's no evidence that she's stolen the joke, it's got to be like, there she is, hating women. This is basically women's violence towards women. Like, why you got to hate on her? Like, why can't it just be a joke that stands? I really liked the joke that she made when she came out. The slap had just happened. And this is how you know she's funny, because she didn't have time to prep for this.
Yeah.
But she walked out after the slap between Will Smith and Chris Rock had just happened, and she had this look on her face like, did I miss anything? And I was like, that's genuinely really funny, because you were out the back. She could sense there was a vibe in the room. That was funny.
I thought it was funny. I thought she was good at the Oscars. But people got really mad about this Kirsten Dunst thing and basically said, Amy Schumer calling Kirsten Dunst a seat filler when nobody's heard of her since 2015. It's like, what? No, that was the joke. And then everybody's like, the slap. That's what Kirsten Dunst should have done to Amy Schumer.
Why though? I'm sure Kirsten Dunst was in on the joke.
She was. It was then confirmed. Amy Schumer had to address it because the backlash was so bad, and she had to say Kirsten Dunst is actually in on the joke and no hate towards her. Then people got really upset about an incest joke.
Will, Jada, what a beautiful couple. We're honoring a lot of couples here tonight, actually. Jada and Will Smith, Penelope and Javier Bardem, and Maggie and Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a night for lovers.
That's hilarious.
Obviously siblings. And people were screenshotting Jake Gyllenhaal's reaction, being like, look how upset he is. But that's her shtick, is acting dumb, and it would be really funny to be hosting the Oscars and not know that Jake and Maggie Gyllenhaal were siblings. That's hilarious. But people got so upset about an incest joke. In terms of willful misinterpretation, I just want to talk about the film I Feel Pretty.
I've been on all of these sites. No one even looks at the profile. They only care about the picture. And I'm sick of it. I've always wondered what it feels like to be just undeniably pretty.
Are you okay? You hit your head pretty hard.
Wait, that's me. Oh my God, you see this?
Yes?
I'm beautiful!
How would you explain the premise?
It was really funny. The premise was that she looks like Amy Schumer, which I think you said at the top of this show that some people call her a chipmunk. Like, that woman has had people insult her appearance her entire career. She's not a size 6. She's not, by Hollywood standards, considered conventionally beautiful. I saw an interview on Ellen where she was like, I can't move to LA because people think that my arms are the size of a normal person's legs here. And they're like, what's that octopus doing? And I was like, that's hilarious. So she's very much hated for how she looks. So the whole premise of that movie was like, what if I hit my head, which is the premise of every Hollywood movie, and everything changed? And she woke up and she was like, I'm really hot. What if I had the like confidence of someone who looked different? And I thought it was really clever.
There's that amazing scene where she meets her friends and she does a really slow twirl and they're like, no, you look exactly the same. I do that all the time, that really slow twirl.
It's like, I know, I look great. And the thing is, I know that Amy Schumer's not a size 22. I know that Amy Schumer's not a woman of color. I know that she doesn't have a disability. I know that she doesn't have multiple, points of intersectionality, and that is a fair enough criticism. However, it was not that long ago that female comics had no platform, that there were no female comedians. It was only literally since 2000 that there have been articles in Vanity Fair written about women aren't funny, women aren't funny. The fact that you've got a woman who is one of the most high-profile comedians in the world is massive. The fact she's not a size 6, the fact that she's not a sex symbol is actually big and transgressive and exciting. And the fact that her shtick is, I have lots of sex and I love it, that is different to anything we've had for years, even if she can't be everything to all women all the time.
I agree. And I think it's a bit frustrating because the criticism about this, there was a comedian who basically said, you know, Amy Schumer is half an inch from being conventionally Hollywood attractive. In order to enjoy the premise of the film, we have to buy into the fact that Schumer isn't attractive, but there are many of us who are bigger than her and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that is the premise of the film. I think it's just about that character believing she's not attractive. It's not about the objectivity of whether she is or not.
No.
There's a lot of people who are conventionally attractive and don't believe that they are. I think that can still be a joke. But it does seem like for a lot of people, Amy Schumer doesn't challenge the stereotype enough. But that frustrates me because men are allowed to make a movie like Step Brothers. And it's just silly.
Claire, I have 2 words for you. Anyone who wants to cancel Amy Schumer, I've got 2 words for you. Are you ready?
Yep.
I'm going to take a deep breath. Adam Sandler. Adam fucking Sandler.
Jack
He
and Jill.
exists. He makes things. As long as that man can make things every year, Amy Schumer can do a big poo and make me spend $50 on it because that is better than anything Adam Sandler. Look, Happy Gilmore was fine. Click, Jack and Jill. White men have been taking the piss for too long. And until women can take the piss to the same extent, we are not equal.
Did he play Jack and Jill?
Yes, Clary put on a wig. He put on a wig. He was Jack and Jill. Right?
That's genius. This comedian who called Amy Schumer out said, what if instead of hitting her head and damaging her brain in order to become so deluded that she'd think she was actually pretty, she read about capitalism and realized that women's low self-esteem is a patriarchal ploy and that she is worthy of self-love. Not funny. That's a lie. Not funny. Don't want to watch a movie about that.
It's the worst comedy. You know what's not funny? Twitter. None of you are funny. You think you are, but you're not. So
no, yeah.
Screw your comedy.
But comedy also isn't meant to be an accurate portrayal of real life. It's meant to be absurd and unrealistic. And then in all the ridiculousness, you're meant to see tiny parts of yourself, reflecting a fundamental truth about who we are. Also, it's a movie. Just like we said in the Love Actually episode, biggest defense, it's a movie. Jesse, it's time for charges and sentences.
Shut up, I'm going first.
Okay.
Because I have 1 charge.
Okay.
And 1 sentence. Do you want to have a guess as to what my charge is? Because it's making the film Snatched.
Okay, but she already made it.
Yeah, that's her charge.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Do I need to explain to you what her charge is? Because that's what I'm finding her guilty of, is making the film Snatched.
Sorry.
Snatched happened and I'm pissed off. So that's my charge. My sentence. And this was easy. Easiest sentence I've ever come up with. Amy Schumer, watch it. You sit down
watch it in a cinema go.
Where I had to go. Sit down in a cinema. You know what? I think I was running late, so I don't even think I got a frozen Coke or a popcorn. I had no snacks. And I sat down. It was probably raining outside. And I went out of my house and I sat down to watch your film. I couldn't get through it. As I said, I left after 28 minutes. You made it. So you sit down for the 90 minutes or however long that goes for and you watch that film. Don't look at your phone. Don't go to the toilet. Don't whisper to the person next to you. You just sit through it. And then I think we're even. What's your charge?
My charge is as follows. Not really playing Monza's picture association game.
Oh, so true. She didn't throw herself in.
She didn't really play it. She didn't really go for it. And so my sentence is, I want her to interview her idol. I think Goldie Hawn is her idol.
Goldie Hawn did Snatched with her, which, I mean, maybe that's her sentence. That she made her idol participate in the worst thing she ever created. I don't know anything worse than that.
I think that what has to happen is that she's going to interview her idol and it's going to go terribly. And her idol is going to just have the general vibe of this is boring and lame and somebody rescue me and I'm going to stare at the camera and ask for help. I really need her to do a terrible terrible interviewed to know how it feels from the other side.
Because what I noticed about that interview was that in most social situations, both people are struggling to fill every silence because silence is uncomfortable. But what was profound about that interview was that neither of them was struggling to fill any silence. So they just sat there, just so loaded and long. And that's what I think she should have to sit through.
I think that's really important.
That's all we've got time for on Cancelled today, but you can go to the twins_thoughts on Instagram where we will share a bunch of receipts. I will actually share the review I wrote of Snatched. And we will share, of course, the full, because you need to watch the interview with Mons. You need to watch the facial expressions. We will share that. All of it will be there. This podcast is produced by Rose Kerr, and the head of podcasts at Mamamia is Eliza Ratliff.
Our pop culture podcast, The Spill, has dropped a bonus episode all about Bridgerton Season 2. So if you're waiting to hear the story behind the biggest plot twists, or hear the hosts unpack the significance of that steamy sex scene and why there was only one this season, take a listen.
The first season, she was happy to have lots of sex scenes in there, but she said that was all about Daphne never having been sexual, was discovering her sexuality and her body. But she said with this season, Anthony, and what did she say? He's already been around the block more than once.
So true.
Which I think, that comes across. And so seeing him discover someone sexually, that's so gross. Seeing him have lots of wild sex scenes wasn't going to have the emotional impact on characters. This is her reasoning. I don't know how much I agree. And so the idea of not seeing him have sex for so many episodes and fall in love emotionally with Kate and then having it all build up to one sex scene was her idea of telling the story.
Find that episode in your favourite podcast app.
We will speak to you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Nobody speaks to me like Mamamia.